If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Oh my god, it's already better than Season 8! Okay, I know this is just the hyped up Brony and me talking, but I'm really just so excited right now. After the inexcusably problematic Season 8, I was being sure to keep my expectations in check for how this season would play out. But as you can see, it seems to have made a really good first impression. The beginning of the end is everything that you could possibly want from a season opener. The pacing is tight, all of the characters are handled properly. It builds anticipation for the rest of the season. The stakes that it raises serves a purpose in the plot. Even the side characters that not a lot of people think about get a chance to shine in this episode, and they all feel useful. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's start at the beginning. Twilight and company are summoned to Canterlot, where Celestia and Luna announce their plans to retire and make Twilight the new ruler of Equestria. While she spends her time freaking out about this, the sinister Grogar summons Cozy Glow, Chrysalis, Tyrek, and Sombra to form an alliance against Twilight Sparkle. But Sombra doesn't have any interest in this alliance and sets off on his own to take over the Crystal Empire. Our heroes try to stop him, but the Tree of Harmony is destroyed in the process. Now with no power source to fight him, Sombra begins his final conquest to take over. Will our heroes find a way to stop him? Oh, who am I kidding, they always do. But even though we already know the heroes are gonna win in the end, the episode still does a pretty nice job pacing it out. The setup, the progression of the story, and the resolution go by at a pretty even speed. Some parts do feel sort of rushed, like the main six overcoming their worst fears or Sombra deciding to work by himself, but the vast majority of it is leveled out excellently. It's also really appreciated that in spite of the threat level surrounding the situation, the episode never goes for being too dark or too gritty. It stays pretty lighthearted and family-friendly while maintaining a sense of tension. Everyone is being brainwashed, the Everfree Forest is growing out of control, the Tree of Harmony has been destroyed, and this is only a sneak preview of the chaos that Grogar is capable of. Speaking of which, Grogar makes a really good first impression. I can't exactly go into detail about what I think of him as a villain since this is his first episode, but so far he seems like a pretty promising antagonist. This is actually a villain based on Generation 1, which I admittedly never saw, but I think it serves as a pretty good introduction to the character. His story was brought up in Season 7 when Twilight was reading that book to those kids in the hospital, and it's nice to know that they're still putting those references to good use. He has a really commanding personality, taking full authority over the other villains, and instead of his backstory being something sad or dramatic like with Starlight and Stygian, it's laid out in a simple way and just allows him to be a traditional menacing Saturday morning cartoon villain. I also really like the way this version of him is designed, where they take his character model and give it some new features while staying loyal to the original appearance. They don't make his eyes all red and dark and give him actual pupils, which is nice since making them all red and dark would have been really overdoing it. He really hides no quarrels in taking anyone's crap, and the way he dismisses Sombra is a golden comedic moment. I also find it pretty funny how he makes a deal to bring Sombra back if he fails, but then just leaves him dead after he fails. Like he saw him as dead weight and just decided to cut his losses. He also makes a really good point by showing the other three villains the problem of going against his alliance, using Sombra's death as a demonstration for why working by themselves wouldn't work. He gives up a potential ally to make his point, but the ally being given up was being a fool, and Grogar just didn't want to take any chances with them. They need to make a compromise and form a plan in order to be a long-term threat, and he points out their weaknesses to further provoke them to siding with him. And so far, I'm actually pretty up for it. Not because the idea sounds cool, but because so far these villains have some really good chemistry. The episode comes up with some pretty fun ways for them to interact with each other, and so far the exchanges fit with their current personalities. Cozy Glow is such an adorable little devil who's actually taking what she sort of learned from the school and applying it to Tyrek and Chrysalis. She's sort of made into a butt monkey amongst these other villains, and it really shows just how out of her element she is. But it never comes across as needlessly cruel. And who knows, she could be faking her timidness and cute behavior as part of a secret plan. On the other hand, Chrysalis has all but completely lost her mind, and it's pretty telling that she's taking out a lot of her frustrations on these other villains. She's honestly kinda pathetic now that she's lost everything. her kingdom, her subjects, her home, and she's pretty much been reduced to a desperate, blethering idiot. It's actually kinda sad, and now she's teaming up with Grogar because she has no other options left. In a small way, I feel kinda bad for her, but she does seem more stable when talking to the other characters, so there's some sort of sanity left in her. It's also a nice bit where she claims on getting revenge on Twilight instead of Starlight, like she's taking a moment to retrace her steps to the root of her defeats. Tyrek is just kinda there as he really doesn't do a lot of interacting, mostly just being unamused by Cozy Glow, though I will admit the way they play off each other is really great, and it even leads into some nice jokes.
Tyrek is really old. No offense, you look great.
As for King Sombra, I'd say he's a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, he does come across as pretty menacing. He manages to cause a lot of irreparable damage by himself and was even able to pull a fast one on the group. He also has this pretty overly confident personality, believing himself to be superior to Grogar and not being all that impressed with his power, which ironically led to his downfall. He actually came pretty close to succeeding, and he seemed to have taken over the town and get them to attack Canterlot pretty quickly. He's also pretty diabolical in that he actually makes the girls see their worst fears as opposed to making them imagine it in their heads. But on the other hand, he does kind of feel like a throwaway villain for how quickly he was defeated. The new voice actor isn't nearly as convincing as he just doesn't fit his design or personality at all. The original voice actor did a much better job making him feel more menacing and intimidating with his deep growling voice. This guy just sounds like a Hispanic guy trying to sound like a comic book villain, and it just doesn't work. And of course, you have that dumb cliche as old as time itself, where the villain doesn't take the opportunity to finish off the heroes when he's given an opportune chance to do it. It may not be the best comeback we could have had with this character, but it at least gives us some kind of posing threat to overcome. I'm just happy this episode retconned the Siege of the Crystal Empire storyline from the comics because my god, it was such a mess. But aside from the villains, there's plenty more to like about the episode. They avoid using Starlight as part of the main team, or worse, making her into the one who saves the day, which is appreciated since the last few seasons have put way too much time into making her a creator's pet. She does a much better job as a supporting role, being there to give Twilight helpful advice and even pulling off a bit of reverse psychology. The princesses also show up and actually help the girls fight off the villain and save the day, instead of just relying on them to do everything after they said they retired, which ends up playing into the baiting they did in the beginning, which we'll get into later. There's a number of references to earlier seasons, but they're used in a way that's appropriate for the story. They're not just a bunch of random moments where the writers say, remember this, and just leave it hanging there for fan service. And thank you, we don't get another rushed villain reformation. They don't give Sombra any kind of undeserved forgiveness or redemption, they literally just obliterate him into vaporized dust. I'm really glad that the staff avoided making an obvious decision and went for something more refreshing compared to what they've been doing the last few times. And the characters are just so great. They're all given writing that deals them proper justice. The dynamic between Twilight and her friends is really well done here. After everything they've been through over the years, there's an intrinsic method to how they interact. The girls and Spike tease Twilight over how predictable she's acting, like they really have known her for years, and they still act very loyal and supportive of her. They really feel like a close group of friends who've experienced so much together, demonstrating the loyalty and teamwork in their group. They work off each other great, and they also work individually. Rainbow Dash is highly confident and quick to action, but also shows restraint and level-headedness. She actually calls out the princesses for never doing shit, which by itself is one of the greatest lines ever said in the show. Spike is still a great straight man and a great foil to Twilight, acting as the ego to her behavior, which shows just how much he's grown and matured throughout the series. AJ gets to be a nice mutual support and also takes a really great stab at Flim and Flam. Like she actually thinks they can be compared to the forces of evil like Tyrek and the Storm King. Rarity puts aside her fears of getting dirt in her hooves and takes charge to dig their way out and rescue her sister. That is just so sweet. Fluttershy acts as a shield to protect the woodland creatures and helps Dash fight off Sombra's forces, expressing fear of the situation but still facing it head on. Diane is also at some of her best in this episode, making jokes that fit into the story, being silly and optimistic in a way that fits in character, and she's also really mature about the situation. Instead of trying to lighten the mood, she recognizes the severity of this and actually doesn't try to crack a joke or witty line.
What are you looking at me for? This is usually when you say something funny to lift our spirits. Sorry, nothing about this is funny to me.
Discord is by far the best thing about the episode, hands down. John Delancey is really flexing his acting chops in this episode, and the writers pull off so many fun and creative stunts with his chaos powers. He also acts as a great support for Twilight as she panics about her insecurities about being a leader, helping out in a way that really aligns with his personality like he did with Rainbow Dash in The Best Gift Ever. He has Twilight face these obstacles on her own instead of relying on him to do everything, which helps her to develop skills and decisive action. He's not just there to make jokes, he's contributing to the story. He encourages the group with a sense of snarky sarcasm, and he puts forth an effort to help Twilight learn an important lesson. And even if he was obviously acting it out, the fact that he took a bullet for Fluttershy is really admirable. The way she reacts to him getting shot just feels so real. You can really sense the shock and pain in her voice. Of course he was obviously faking it, but there was a purpose behind faking it. And it really worked since it helped Twilight find her confidence a lot more than just directly intervening. It shows how everything he does is done in a way to show that he cares. To see this coming from someone who used to be one of the show's biggest villains just feels wonderful because he developed a relationship with the group that really holds meaning. It also gives the princesses and Star Swirl something to do, fending off the forest and buying time for the girls to take on Sombra. Cadance and her family play a nice little role in fighting Sombra, and Shining Armor roasting him was just so enjoyably savage. Even Twilight gets a really profound role in the story, facing the biggest challenge she's ever faced so far by proving herself as a leader after so many years of experience. We all joke about her freakouts and her overreactions, but this time it's completely understandable. She suddenly has a huge responsibility dumped on her and is supposedly given very little time to prepare for it, all while taking on Sombra's invasion on Equestria. The way she deals with his dark magic is also such a huge boss moment, slowly advancing on him and swatting his beams like it's nothing. Man, what a badass. I know that it's a minor point to talk about, but the animation is just so astounding now. If you were to go back to any episode of Season 1 and really compare it to this episode, it really shows just how much they've improved. The movements are so fluid and the visuals are crisp and clean, and the lighting effects are so clear and detailed that it's really hard to believe that so much work would be put into something called My Little Pony. And finally, there's the subject of Celestia and Luna literally trolling Twilight into thinking that she's suddenly going to be the leader, and it's handled in a way that's actually pretty clever. From those smug looks to all of those talks about taking vacations, it was just such a great troll move. It's also pretty cool that after all these years, Celestia managed to counter-troll Discord, just getting a playful bit of revenge. But they do confront Twilight and express the feelings they have on the potential she showed by taking on Sombra, and they admit that it wouldn't be a good idea to suddenly make her leader, giving her more time to think and prepare for it. It's actually pretty cool that they didn't really retire while simultaneously passing down the mantle in some way. With Twilight becoming Celestia's successor at the end of the series, it makes me so happy that the current writing staff are fulfilling Lauren Faust's last wish for how she envisioned the series would play out. Rainbow Dash became a Wonderbolt, the CMC got their cutie marks, Rarity got her boutique, and now Twilight is going to be Equestria's new leader. After all these years, we're really coming full circle, and it makes me proud of the people behind the show for carrying on what she wanted for this series long after she stopped working on it. It's bittersweet, but bittersweet in the best way possible. The beginning of the end is one of the best, possibly the best season opener in the series because it does everything right as a season opener. It handles the characters properly, it paces out the story evenly, and it builds anticipation for the rest of the season. It's epic in a way that doesn't offset the tone of the rest of the series, and it sets up the risk and stakes for the final season. After all the drama surrounding Season 8, I can safely say that Season 9 makes a great first impression. It puts the series back on track, and I really hope that it stays that way. This is Map signing out.